Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace was released on May 16th, 1999 and stars a fresh-faced cast of Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Jake Lloyd, Ray Park and the returning talents of Ian McDiarmid, Anthony Daniels and Kenny Baker. Yes, I know that on my last review, which was over a year ago, I said I'd be getting onto the prequels before the release of Force Awakens on Blu-ray, but I didn't really realise how stressful the making of these videos would be, so I just thought, you know, I've done the original trilogy, I might as well just leave it there. But you know, summer holidays, haven't got much to do, so I might as well continue with my reviews of the Star Wars saga, starting with the first instalment of the prequel trilogy, The Phantom Menace. And just a quick disclaimer, I won't be using a VHS in this review like I did my previous reviews, because one, I don't even have the VHS of Phantom Menace, and two, even though there are some special edition changes in this film, they're nowhere near to the extent of the original three, so for this review, I'll just be using the 2011 Blu-ray. Now, I don't think I need to tell you about the release of this film. The hype for this film in 1999 was unavoidable. I mean, there have been countless documentaries and stuff about it, just talking about the build-up to this movie. Like with Batman in 1989, people were paying tickets to see a movie just to see the trailer for this movie and then leave. People were like downloading trailers and that onto their computers, which was kind of a big thing at the time. Computers weren't very big at the time, so still, people were like hacking into stuff, trying to get any information they can. People were joining fan clubs, buying magazines. Some people were camping out for days, even weeks, just to get to the premiere of this movie. People were going to America from all around the world just to see the very first showing. It was unbelievable. And even some people I've talked to who were around in 1999, they have said that Darth Maul's face was on the side of every bush. You could not avoid Phantom Menace. But, in addition to being one of the most hyped movies of all time, it is now known for being one of the most disappointing films of all time. I mean, don't get me wrong, when Phantom Menace was first released, people praised it for its groundbreaking special effects, the lightsaber choreography, and Joel Williams' always amazing score. But as time went on, people started to notice things they didn't like about this movie. Like, the effects were starting to look pretty dated, while the choreography was good, so people thought it lacked tension because it was too perfect, and the characters weren't as fun as they used to be. Some people thought the politics were a bit monotone and boring, and of course Jar Jar Binks, one of the most infamous characters in movie history. And also recently there's been a similar effect with The Force Awakens. When Force Awakens came out, it got amazing reviews and everyone loved it, but as the months went on, really, it didn't even take years, people started to realise things they didn't like about Force Awakens, so it just makes me go back to Phantom Menace and think, is it as bad as fandom makes it out to be? Or was it just a bit too overhyped for the fans? Well, that's what I'm going to find out, so let's dive into Star Wars The Phantom Menace. So we start off film like every other Star Wars film, the opening crawl, but from the get-go you can tell something's off. Like, we're no longer being told about evil empires, rebellions and weapons of mass destruction. We're now being told about the taxation of trade routes and greedy trade federations and blockades. And you can tell this is going to be a different kind of Star Wars movie, and although people have made fun of this a lot, you know what, I'm going to defend it, because this sets up something we haven't seen in Star Wars before, and that's moral grey area. I mean, if you think about it, that's the key theme in the prequel trilogy. For example, Anakin's our main protagonist, but throughout the whole series he's got this darkness lurking in him that by the end of the trilogy he embraces. Or the Republic, we're supposed to root for them, but at the same time they're very arrogant in their ways. And Trade Federation, they are bad guys, but some people are a bit unsure about what they're doing. Or Qui-Gon, he's our main character in this film, but he's not on the Jedi Council because he sees the problems with them. Which creates a really interesting dynamic between him and Obi-Wan. And the Sith, they're supposed to be the bad guys, but they have their own reasons for leaving the Jedi Order. In that they don't embrace the Force to its full capacity, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, I'm going to give this intro a pass. So we're introduced to our main characters, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and there are a few things I like about this scene, but there are also some few things I don't like. So let's start with things I do like. I like that this sets up the dynamic between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. We get a really good view of their personality traits just in these 3 lines of dialogue. We get to see that Qui-Gon is kind of a grey Jedi almost, in that he's very calm and collected and he believes in the will of the Force to guide his actions. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, he's very arrogant and rash, and when Qui-Gon's trying to teach him something, he arrogantly quotes Yoda on why he should be mindful of his surroundings. So we get to see two sides of the same coin of what the Jedi are. You get some Jedi that believe in the flow of the Force, or some Jedi that are very overly cautious and arrogant and set in their ways, which I think makes a really interesting dynamic between these two. And another thing that I like about this scene is they introduce us to the Jedi ranking system. There's a Master and an Apprentice, but Jedi Apprentices are called Padawans, and that's how we know it now. You go Jedi Initiate, Jedi Padawan, Jedi Knight, Jedi Master, and then Jedi Grandmaster. And also introduce that when Padawans are under the teachings of a Jedi, they have to have a specific haircut, they have to have a Padawan braid to show that they're still learning. And I think that's a really cool concept, and it makes it easy for us to follow. Now let's talk about the things I don't like about this scene. And the first thing is the actual Jedi uniforms. It's ridiculous. I mean, they look cool, but at the same time, the robes that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan wear in this film are the same robes that Obi-Wan and Uncle Owen has in A New Hope. So that just tells the audience that when Obi-Wan was in hiding on Tatooine, he wore his Jedi robes even though they're outlawed. And I guess Uncle Owen got one as well. And it's just ridiculous. It's like if police officers were outlawed, but people just walked around in police uniforms and not expected not to get noticed. And maybe that is right. Maybe that is what happened. But at the same time, in Return of the Jedi, we see what the Jedi uniform looks like. From Luke, he's all in black. He's got his collar, he's got his boots and his belt, and you think, yeah, that must be what the Jedi wore back in the day. I mean, where else would he get all that stuff from? But no, apparently the Jedi uniform is Tatooine middle-aged man robes. And I'm actually not the only one to notice this, because if you look at Belated Media's What If Episode 1 through 3 Were Good, which I'd highly recommend, by the way, if you look closely, when you see his versions of how the prequel should go, you see the Jedi are in the uniform that Luke wears in Return of the Jedi. So how did George Lucas miss this? It was right there. And so it is something that really annoys me throughout the whole prequel trilogy now that I've noticed it. And another thing I don't like about this scene is that even though George Lucas says he wants new fans to watch the Star Wars films in episodic order, this scene is just way too heavy-handed with information that we're all supposed to soak in for new viewers. For example, the first time we see these guys, they're in robes, so we're thinking, oh, are they monks? And then they start talking about senses, and like, what, do they have powers? And they talk about Master Yoda, who the hell is he? And then it's just a bit too much for someone to take in on a first viewing if you haven't seen the original trilogy. And that's sort of something that annoys me about this film. There's a lot of moments in there that are supposed to get like cheers from the audience who have seen the original trilogy. Like there's a lot of references to the original trilogy, but if George Lucas wants us to watch them in this order, then new viewers, it's not going to do anything for them. And this is a big reason to why I personally don't agree with having the episode numbers in the title of the film, because they're just misleading and they confuse a lot of people. For example, I've heard of loads of people saying that they wanted to watch the franchise, but they started Phantom Menace, didn't like it, and then they just gave up on the whole franchise, and that just really irritates me. So even though I disagree with a lot of the stuff that Disney's currently doing with the franchise, one thing I definitely praise it for is now that it's re-releasing all the Star Wars films, not the original copies I'm afraid, but still when they release them, they market them as Star Wars and it's subtitled without the episodes, which I definitely agree with, and it's how I label them in my reviews. And my final complaint about this scene, it's not really about this scene on its own, it's really about the movie as a whole, but it starts it, and it's that we never really get a clear protagonist in Phantom Menace. So I think it's a big issue, because when you've got a movie as big as this, you'll need one central character for an audience to relate to and see you through their point of view. And people with portrayal here is, it's not Obi-Wan because he doesn't really have much to do, even though I think it should be. It's not Anakin because at this point he is 9 years old, and we only introduced him halfway through the film, and it doesn't really influence the course of the film that much. So really think about it, the only one left is Qui-Gon. But at the end of the day, why would you make it Qui-Gon? Because the main selling point for this prequel trilogy was to see the story of Anakin and Obi-Wan. So you want to see them two, so it should be Obi-Wan's main character. But we just got this new character in our face, and we were like, okay, this is a new guy, you're following him now through this film. And it's like, do we really want that? And what even makes it worse is Qui-Gon's mere existence messes with the continuity itself, because in the original trilogy, we're told that Yoda was Obi-Wan's master, and when he took on, when Obi-Wan took on Anakin, he was arrogant and he thought he'd be able to teach just as good as Yoda taught him, if not better, but then he learned he was wrong when he turns into Darth Vader. So to have Obi-Wan being trained by this new character Qui-Gon, it doesn't make any sense with continuity, but this is the character that we have to follow. So yeah, that is one of my biggest complaints about Phantom Menace, and like I said, it's not really something to do with this scene, it's just started something that goes throughout the whole film. And yes, we're also introduced to the Viceroy and the Nemodians. And yeah, they're pretty stupid. I mean, their accents are beyond offensive to Asian people. Their mouths are so out of sync with the dialogue, it's ridiculous. But still, it's a practical effect. They look pretty convincing, so it's more like I say for the Gungans anyway. And it's here where we get to see Uma Thurman's triumphant return to the screen as Darth Sidious. And his casting really is perfect, because in Return of the Jedi, he was only 39 years old when playing the Emperor, whose character was actually 100 years old. So now it's 20 years later. He's now the perfect age to play a younger Emperor, so it really is perfect. And some people do say that his story here isn't as compelling as it was in Return of the Jedi, and yeah, I'd have to agree with that, but still, I think it's very interesting to see how this man slithers through the ranks of the Republic, which would eventually make him the Emperor of the Galaxy. So yeah, Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor is definitely a plus here. So we've now reached the scene where the Viceroy decides to kill the Jedi with toxic gas, and But this scene doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, he tells the battle droids to go in and destroy what's left of the Jedi because they must be dead by now. But shouldn't he have waited like an extra 10 minutes to make sure they're dead? I mean, if they got out, then the chances are that the Jedi will probably kill the Viceroy. But I guess we can't have our heroes die in the first 5 minutes of the movie. So onward with the plot, and yeah, as you can see, we get to see some badass Jedi action here. And some people do say that the droids don't really lack. The droids lack any tension because they're, well, droids. But still, even if they were stormtroopers, they still won't have that much tension because the Jedi will be able to cut through them like butter anyway. And at least they can aim, so that's something. And we're also introduced to this strange mood, the force speed thing, and I really think George Lucas shouldn't have included this because there are so many moments in the whole saga where a Jedi could just use force speed and then just been out of a situation like that. And it does create a lot of plot holes in the saga, so nah, force speed, not a good thing for me. So now we're introduced to Natalie Portman's character Queen Amidala, and she is pain-inducingly dull. Everything she says is monotone and dull. She has basically no personality, and her voice sounds so strange. I mean, in the trailer she sounds like a normal teenage girl, but you can just tell in post-production they made her voice sound really deep, and it's like you turned on the deep voice thing on Snapchat. It's so weird! I mean, I think that George Lucas was going for, oh, she wants to sound more mature than she is because she's only a 14-year-old girl, but it just didn't work at all. It sounds so bad. So we find Queen Amidala in a council meeting where the holograms stop working. So Sia Bibble concludes that this can only mean one thing: invasion. Which I think is a bit of an extreme assumption. I mean, maybe the voltage box is down, or maybe he forgot to pay your electricity bill. But as fate would have it, there is an invasion underway, and we're introduced to the franchise's best character, Jar Jar Binks. Don't hate me, I'm kidding, but in all honesty, he's not that bad. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's an annoying presence, he gets very grating when he's been on screen for too long, and he's obviously just there for the kids. But at the end of the day, he's not cruel, he's not mean, and he has good intentions, and he's not the only thing that's wrong with this movie. So it's hard for me to stay mad at him for too long. So after our heroes get acquainted with Jar Jar, he leads them to an underwater city where he used to live, and if you just ignore the fact that they're using breathing apparatuses that they probably should have used earlier when they were being gassed, what ensues is a marvel of visual and musical storytelling. Just seeing this beautiful city getting slowly revealed behind the rock, accompanied by John Williams' masterful score, just makes for fantastic cinema and one of my personal favourite moments in the entire film. Unfortunately, the excitement does vary when we're introduced to some more Gungans such as Tarpals and Boss Nass. And even though Jar Jar himself gets a lot of hate, the rest of the Gungans are much better, to be fair. But still, we're treated to some great set design, and Boss Nass is voiced by Brian Blessed, and who can stay angry at him? We are, however, given a strange piece of information from Boss Nass that the quickest way to get to Thee, the Jedi's destination, is through the planet Core, which doesn't really make much sense because that implies that they landed on the other side of the planet. But still, what ensues is another visually stunning underwater scene. And yeah, there are a few problems with this scene. For example, we get some pointless Jar Jar exposition that no one cares about, and a lot of people complain that the Jedi don't really seem to give a shit about what's happening. But I want to defend that because these are Jedi in their prime. They deal with stuff worse than this before breakfast on a daily basis. So I don't think they're going to care too much about being chased by a big fish. And yeah, some people do say that's a get out of jail free card, but it works for me and I still love this scene. I mean, seriously, look at the CGI in this scene. It's impeccable, even by today's standards. So Naboo's being invaded, and the Viceroy asks the Queen to sign a treaty to make this invasion of theirs legal. Of course, the Queen refuses, but the Viceroy insists that in time, the suffering of her people will change her mind. And I think this was a big missed opportunity from George Lucas here, because we never actually see the suffering of these people. So in the final conflict, the audience isn't going to have any emotional connection, because we don't really get to see what the heroes are fighting for. And I think if we just got one scene to show how the people of Naboo are suffering, it would have changed a lot. And also, if the Viceroy needs the Queen to sign a treaty to make the invasion legal, why aren't they getting arrested right now? I mean, look out the window. The invasion's happening like right now. So why isn't the Republic? So why isn't the Republic intervening ASAP? And it gets even worse later on when the Queen pleads to the Senate, which I'll talk about later. So we get this odd scene where R2-D2 is being commended by the Queen for fixing a shield generator, which probably shouldn't have got hit anyway since it was generating a shield, and he's a droid and it's what it's programmed to do. But still, the best part comes when, at this point, the Queen is actually a handmaiden in disguise, and she demands that the Queen, disguised as a handmaiden, scrub the shit off the droid as a sign of gratitude. Yeah, she probably got the sack soon after the events of this film. So we're taken back to the familiar planet of Tatooine, and I gotta say, I love how George Lucas expands this universe here. We get to see a whole other side of Tatooine not seen in the original trilogy. We get to see that there's pod racing, there's gambling, there's slavery, and junkyard dealers, and I think it gives some great scope to an already beloved part of Star Wars. So we're introduced to little Anakin Skywalker, played by Jake Lloyd, and I'll say it now, Jake Lloyd is nowhere near as bad in this role as people make him out to be. Yeah, his dialogue's a bit cheesy and he's not winning any Oscars anytime soon, but he's a 9-year-old kid, give him a break. And even if you do find him a bit annoying, he's not in the movie that much. And heck, I even say his acting in this is better than the trio in the first Harry Potter movie. This film also gets some criticism for the relationship between Anakin and Padme being cheesy, but he's a 9-year-old kid with a crush, of course he's going to spout some cheese. It's hardly Romeo and Montague, is he? And even if you don't like it, they don't have that much screen time together, so get over it. And I think their relationship's a lot more natural in this than it is in Attack of the Clones. And you know what else? I like the concept of Anakin in this movie, and I don't agree with people who say that he should be a teenager when we're introduced to him so we can relate to him more, because one, we're not supposed to relate to him anyway, he's not the main character, Qui-Gon is. And two, the overarching story of the saga is the life of Anakin Skywalker, so to skip past his childhood would be a bit silly in my opinion. And I also like that he's a slave. It's a great contrast when we see him grow up to be one of the most powerful men in the galaxy. I like that he's already an accomplished pilot, because it makes sense with what Obi-Wan said in Return of the Jedi about him already being a great pilot. And yes, the whole being born from a virgin birth thing is a bit heavy-handed with the Jesus metaphor, but still, it's a somewhat believable explanation to why this kid will grow up to be one of the most powerful Jedi who ever lived, because he was literally conceived by the Force. So yeah, I'm going to give Anakin Skywalker a thumbs up in this movie. So Qui-Gon's looking for the parts to his broken ship, but he can't buy it because Watto doesn't accept Republic credits. And yeah, this doesn't make a lot of sense. There's like infinite possibilities on how he could have gotten out of this situation. I'll just name a few that are the most obvious to me. Well, the most obvious one I think is Watto said he doesn't accept Republic credits, so go to a stock exchange. And even if there isn't one, sell the parts to the Nubian that do work and hire someone else to fly away on their ship, like in A New Hope. Or just buy a new ship, even if it's a crappy one, at least it's getting you off the planet. Or you can just look somewhere else. I mean, he can't be the only person on the planet to sell these specific parts he needs. Or even as a last resort, just steal the parts of this ship. You're a Jedi, for goodness sakes. And yeah, I know it's not the Jedi way, but a whole planet is starving, so I think it's the lesser of two evils if you think about it. Yeah, it's a massive plot thread, and it's really just an excuse to get to the pod race, really. So Anakin takes our heroes back to his house, and we find out that he's in fact the one to build C-3PO. Well, Master C-3PO looks cool, and it's great to have Anthony Daniels back as the character. I don't like it. It's just an excuse to have everything to be connected. And it kind of renders him silly in the visual trilogy because he always says thank the maker, but now when he says thank the maker it's a reference to Darth Vader. So was that just a running gag? I don't know. And I also don't buy that Jake Lloyd, I also don't buy that Anakin could build him. I mean, I can buy that he built a pod racer, because if you look at the other pod racers in this film, it's pretty crappy in comparison, so I can buy that. But to build a protocol droid that can speak over 6 million forms of communication, I'm calling bullshit right there. We also get this moment where C-3PO meets R2-D2 for the first time and we're all supposed to fanboy out, which brings me to my previous point of George Lucas saying that he wants people to watch the Star Wars films in episodic order. So to newcomers to the series, this moment won't mean anything to them. And if you think about it, this movie is set around 40 odd years before A New Hope. So chances are these droids probably won't even exist at the time. So to me, the droids in this film feel really forced and tactile, and I could probably do without them, to be honest. Here we see Anakin working on the final touches to his pod racer, and I gotta admit, this scene with Jar Jar does make me smile, just when his tongue goes numb and it's flapping around and the way he talks, and when he gets his hand stuck in the turbine. I don't know, it's just one of the few Jar Jar moments in this film that I find legitimately funny. And here we have the infamous Midi-Chlorian scene, and yeah, I must admit, it does devalue the concept of the Force that we learned in the original trilogy, that if you had enough belief and willpower you could accomplish anything, but with the introduction of Midi-Chlorians we now know that there is a limit to that potential. For example, if there's a guy with like 10,000 Midi-Chlorians but he doesn't really give a crap about the Force, but there's a guy with 5,000 Midi-Chlorians and he's really passionate about the Force, the guy with 10,000 Midi-Chlorians is always going to be better, and that is kind of stupid. But still, at the end of the day, it is a good way to communicate into the audience that why not everyone is Force sensitive and why not everyone is using the Force to do anything. And there are a lot of people out there that complain that this concept completely destroys the mythos of Star Wars because it turns it from a magical energy field into a blood test. But I don't agree with that, because Midi-Chlorians and the Force are not the same thing. Midi-Chlorians are just a way of calculating an individual's Force potential. And while I do have my problems with the concept of Midi-Chlorians, it doesn't destroy the Star Wars mythos like people make it out to. So Darth Maul arrives on the planet in search of the Jedi, and I really love this scene. It's not so much a scene as it is a moment, but still there's some great cinematography at work here, and the setting is really cool. Seeing Tatooine and what looks like the Break of Dawn was really cool. We get to see a good look at Darth Maul's ship, and we get to see how he tracks down his enemies with the droids. It's a small moment, but a really good one in my opinion. So we finally reached the pod race, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot to love here. The visual effects were amazing, especially for 1999. The sound design was so on point, and there's some really great camera work that makes this whole sequence feel fast and intense. But I can't help but feel like it's wasted, because the whole sequence is so long and repetitive. It just gets really boring really quickly. I mean, everything here is on the same level, nothing really elevates this sequence, and a lot of the camera work, like I said, the camera work's mostly really good, but a lot of the shots are just on the right hand side, panning from left to right, and that happens a lot throughout this sequence, and eventually I just get bored after the first lap. Seriously, every time I watch this movie, when C-3PO says that Anakin has to complete 2 more circuits, I just roll my eyes, because I'm just bored out of my mind by the end of the first lap. So Anakin wins the pod race and he's off with Qui-Gon to become a Jedi, and what we get is a beautiful and heartfelt scene in which Anakin says goodbye to his mother. And I feel like this is a great character moment for Anakin as well, because when the prospect of becoming a Jedi Knight comes up, he's all giddy and excited and he's out of that house like a shot. But then he turns around and he realises that he's leaving behind his entire life, and with the help of John Williams' amazing score, I feel like this scene has some real emotional weight to it. So after running with Darth Maul, Qui-Gon introduces Obi-Wan to Anakin, and it's ridiculously anticlimactic. And if I'm honest, the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan in this movie is one of my least favourite things about the film. Obi-Wan should not have had to train Anakin at obligation, and while you can argue it's a good explanation to why Obi-Wan eventually failed Anakin and he turned to the dark side, because Obi-Wan was underqualified and he didn't want to train him in the first place, but it just renders their relationship so hollow and meaningless, and it has no meat to their relationship. And it kind of contradicts what Obi-Wan said in Return of the Jedi, where he says, "I thought I could train him just as good as Yoda. I was wrong." So this is how I think the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan should have gone in this film. Well, I think Obi-Wan should have really lobbied for Anakin, and while you can argue that contradicts his character, well, that would be a great character arc for him. As the movie progresses, he can learn to be more like Qui-Gon, and eventually we can get a scene where Obi-Wan says to Qui-Gon, "Look, Master, I know that you want the kid to become a Jedi, but you can't train him yourself because you already got a Padawan, so why don't you let me do it?" Then Qui-Gon say to Obi-Wan, "Thanks for the offer, but you're just a Padawan yourself, and you're not ready to train someone as advanced as this." So then, in the final confrontation with Darth Maul, when Obi-Wan defeats Darth Maul, Qui-Gon can see that he's become a capable warrior, so when he's dying he can say to Obi-Wan, "Obi-Wan, you have my permission to train the boy, you've proven yourself a capable warrior," and that's when Obi-Wan can become overconfident and be all like, "Yes, Master, I promise you I'll train him to the best of my ability, he'll be the most powerful Jedi ever, I promise." And then that will give meat to their relationship and will make the audience want to see him succeed. And that will fit in more with what Obi-Wan said in Return of the Jedi. But still, that's just my interpretation. Right, so after we get this amazing shot from space, we're introduced to the planet of Khorasan, and I'm going to be honest, Khorasan is one of my favourite things about the prequel trilogy, and one of my favourite Star Wars planets in general. I mean, just the concept alone that the whole planet is one big city, and essentially the capital to the entire galaxy. It's also where the Jedi Temple is, where the Jedi mainly operate, and it's where the main political stuff goes down. And just think about what this did for the film industry in general. I mean, up until this point, CGI has only really been used to enhance certain visuals or its background objects, but here, the visual effects team on the Phantom Menace has created entire worlds of CGI. And even though it does look a bit dated at points, you can't deny this was a big step forward in the film industry. And to be honest, it's things like this that make it really hard for me to dislike the prequels. Now we get to the most political part of Phantom Menace, and even though I'm one of the people to actually defend the scenes on Khorasan, I can't deny that this scene is just awful. I mean, there's nothing interesting happening, there's nothing interesting visually, there's no music, it's just this pointless, boring political babble between Palpatine and Amidala, and even they don't sound interesting. Seriously, you listen to the tone in their voices, everyone here just sounds like they want to leave, and to be honest, that's probably how the audience felt at this point as well. But on the plus side, we also get this scene, the Jedi Council scene. After all these years, we finally get to see how the Jedi Council actually work. I mean, Yoda's here, and hey, Samuel Jackson's a Jedi, that's awesome, right? And I think it's stuff like this that people really overlook when looking at Phantom Menace, and just the prequel trilogy in general, really. Just how much they expanded this universe. I mean, if we never got this trilogy, we'd never really know how the Jedi worked. I mean, yeah, we did get books and expanded universe, but that was only really Luke's interpretation of how he thought the Jedi worked, but not really anything proper like this. I mean, because of this movie as well, we also get to know the Jedi ranking system. You start off as a Jedi Initiate, also known as a Youngling, then when you're taken under the wing of a Jedi Knight or Master, you become a Padawan, and then you face the Jedi Trials, which aren't really focused on much, which I'm disappointed in, but if you pass the Jedi Trials, you become a Jedi Knight, then once you've seasoned, you become a Jedi Master, and if you're lucky, you'll get on the Jedi Council and become a Grand Master. And seriously, how many times have you heard the word Youngling, Padawan and Darth Maul in pop culture? And to be honest, if George Lucas can come up with things like this that still resonate with fans and pop culture to this day, after being out of the game for 20 years, I take my hat off to the man, I really do. But again with the cons, this scene isn't perfect. I mean, they rectified it now, but back in 1999 when this was released, they used a puppet Yoda instead of CGI, and it looked dreadful. I mean, the puppetry was bad to begin with, but even worse, he didn't even look anything like Yoda from the original trilogy. He could barely move his lips, he couldn't emote, he could barely move his eyes, it was awful. I mean, luckily with the Blu-ray release they did change it to CGI and it looks miles better, but still, I don't get why they didn't just use the puppet from Empire Strikes Back from Return of the Jedi, because I think that puppet looks better than the CGI and puppet version here. I don't know, maybe they lost the original puppet, but I don't know, it's just what I would have done. Right, now we're on to the Senate scene, one of the most infamous scenes in the whole saga, but you know what? I'm going to defend this scene as well, because everyone says this scene is just political babble, but it's not like it's not relevant. I mean, they're basically discussing the main plot of the entire movie. And we also get to see more of Palpatine manipulating Queen Amidala, planting the seeds of what will eventually win him an empire. I think that's pretty interesting. And even if you're not interested in what's actually going on screen, look at the visuals, it's awesome. I mean, the idea of a galactic senate itself is awesome. Like, senators from every planet in the galaxy get their own booth and put their input on what goes on in the laws of the Republic. I think that's a pretty awesome concept. And if you look here, there's even cameos from the ET race. What's not to love about this scene? However, I do have one major gripe of this scene, and that's that the Trade Federation is saying that Naboo doesn't have any evidence to say that they're actually invading their home planet. So Valorum isn't sure of who to trust. Well, they made it very clear in the opening crawl that it was Valorum who sent Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to see what the hell was going on with Naboo. So now that they've come back, why the hell haven't they been summoned to Senate to testify? And it really annoys me because it's such a big plot hole and it's so obvious, it almost ruins the scene for me, really. So after testing Anakin, Jedi Council decide that he's not to be trained in the Jedi arts, and honestly, I don't get it. I mean, they do say that he is too old, but you know, that's a load of bollocks, because when Luke started his Jedi training, he was in his early 20s, and I can't see why the Jedi would basically want to brainwash babies from birth into the ways of the Jedi, but who cares? I mean, Anakin might be a bit late to the game, but he has the highest count of Midi-Chlorians ever seen in a life form, so he's got a pretty big head start anyway. And Qui-Gon even addresses this when he says he is the chosen one, you must see this, and they just completely dismiss him. I mean, what, do they not think Anakin is the chosen one? Is the chosen one prophecy just a load of bullshit? Are they jealous of Anakin? I don't know. It just really annoys me because it's never really made clear why the Jedi Council think like this. And honestly, I think it's just a lazy attempt to get us to root for Anakin even more, but it just doesn't make much sense. So our heroes return to Naboo to take the planet back from the Trade Federation, but in order to do that they need the help of the Gungans. And what we get is quite a good twist in my opinion, that Padme the Handmaiden is in fact the Queen and she's been switching places with her decoy. And I actually quite like this twist, to be honest. I also appreciate that that Natalie Portman didn't just play herself and the decoy, and they actually got an actress, Keira Knightley, who looked and sounded like Natalie Portman, and honestly, I think it was pretty convincing. So yeah, I actually quite like this scene, to be honest. So we've reached the climax of the film, and there's a lot to talk about here. There are actually 4 final battles, and I think it's kind of funny that the original Star Wars had 1 climax, the sequel, Empire Strikes Back, had 2, Return of the Jedi had 3, and Phantom Menace had 4. Thank God Attack of the Clones didn't have 5. But in all seriousness, I've never had a problem with the climax of this movie. Yeah, while you can argue that the Gungan fight is a bit too much slapstick and a bit goofy, it definitely feels necessary to the plot. Anakin, on the other hand, accidentally flying into space and accidentally blowing up the droid station. Yeah, I can do without that in this movie, if I'm honest. But Padme and Panaka retaking the palace definitely feels like it needs to happen. And while we don't necessarily need a lightsaber fight here, I mean, we've got to have a lightsaber fight at the end of a Star Wars movie. It's just tradition at this point. And while we're on the topic of the lightsaber fight, let's talk about that. The lightsaber fight in this movie is awesome. I mean, yeah, you've heard the complaints, it's over-choreographed, there's no emotional weight because there's no connection between Maul and the Jedi. No emotional weight? This is the first time a Jedi and a Sith have been in real combat for over 1,000 years. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty invested in that. And over-choreographed? These are Jedi in their prime. I mean, let's just say George Lucas did the opposite, and he knew it would be over-choreographed, so he did the choreography similar to how it was in the original trilogy. Then everyone would call him out on it. They'd be like, oh, these are supposed to be Jedi in their prime, why are they acting like Luke and Vader in the original trilogy? And he said, oh, I didn't want it to be over-choreographed. Everyone would rip his head off. So it was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So yeah, this still gets a definite pass from me, and in my opinion it's one of the greatest lightsaber fights of all time, which is only elevated even more by John Williams' epic score in Duel of the Fates, which in my opinion is one of the greatest Star Wars songs of all time. And hey, what about this scene, the ray shield scene? I absolutely love this scene. Seeing each of our characters in this fight isolated gives us a great look at their main personality traits. Qui-Gon is meditating, regaining his health when the fight will continue. Obi-Wan is at the back, hasty, ready to get into the battle. And Darth Maul, he's just pacing left and right like a caged animal waiting for its prey. And that is awesome. However, I do have one gripe with this scene that I probably should address, and that's that earlier on in the film we saw that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan had an ability called Force Speed where you can go like super fast. So yeah, it's pretty obvious that Obi-Wan probably should have used that here and maybe avoided Qui-Gon's death. Weren't really thinking about that, were you, Obi-Wan? So unfortunately, Qui-Gon dies at the hands of Darth Maul, and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul prepare for one final showdown. And people say that there should have been some more raw emotion in this fight, considering that the Sith Lord has just slaughtered Obi-Wan's master. But I don't really think that, because these are Jedi that have been trained to suppress their emotions, as we see more of in future movies. So I think it's important that Obi-Wan knew now more than ever to remember his training and keep his focus, because if he lost his concentration, Darth Maul probably would have seen an opening and killed him. But no, Obi-Wan remembered his training, remembered to keep his cool and keep his lightsaber fighting in top form, which eventually won him the fight. So after an incredible lightsaber fight, Obi-Wan is able to defeat and kill Darth Maul. And yeah, I do have to agree with people who say that killing Maul is one of the biggest mistakes of the prequel trilogy. I mean, everything was already laid out for Darth Maul to be a great villain. He had the look, he had the double-ended lightsaber, all the fans were ready to see him in action, and he even had a bit of a motivation as well. From his scenes with Sidious, we could see that he wanted to get revenge on the Jedi for keeping the Sith extinct for over 1,000 years. And I honestly think that if they kept Darth Maul as the core villain for the prequel trilogy, and handled his character in a similar fashion to the way they did in the Clone Wars, I honestly think that Darth Maul could be regarded as the Darth Vader of our generation. So, Qui-Gon has his funeral, the Jedi Council have agreed to let Obi-Wan train Anakin because reasons, and we're taken to a celebration of peace between the Naboo and the Gungans. And I just want to say, I absolutely love this ending music. It's so happy and upbeat, and I think it's a great way to cap off this movie. So that was The Phantom Menace, and referring back to what I said at the beginning of the video, do I think this movie deserves all the hate it's gotten, or do I think it's just been too overhyped? Well, honestly, I think neither, because even though I do think the hype this movie got did contribute to why it was widely seen as a disappointment, I do think there are some genuine flaws with this movie as well. The main one for me being the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, but you've heard me talk about that already. But don't get me wrong, there is some stuff in this movie that everyone hates on, that I either am indifferent about or even like. Like the politics, for example. Everyone says the politics in this movie are boring. I actually find it interesting. Everyone hates on Jake Lloyd as Anakin in this movie. I personally like Anakin in this movie. Yeah, his character could have been presented better, but I'm fine with what we got. Everyone says there's a lack of emotion in the final battle and it was too over-choreographed. As you've already seen, I don't really think that way. And everyone says there are a lot of racial stereotypes, such as Jar Jar, Watto and the Viceroy. Oh, I'm not too sure about the Gungans and the Toydarians being racist. Yeah, the Viceroy and his crew are definitely racist, I'll give you that. But personally, when I grew up watching Star Wars, Phantom Menace was always my least favourite of the saga. mainly because the story is so disconnected and it really just feels like a prologue to the rest of the franchise, because the overarching theme of the saga is the rise, fall and redemption of Anakin Skywalker, and in that regard you only really need this movie to introduce Anakin to Obi-Wan, but because that was done so poorly, it just begs the question, why didn't they just use Attack of the Clones as Episode 1 and use exposition for Phantom Menace? Because really, if you think about it that way, Phantom Menace is pretty pointless in the overall saga. And a big thing that I felt was a big step back from the original trilogy was the banter between the characters, or lack thereof. Because even though I do like the characters in this movie and I find a lot of them interesting, most of the time they come off as so monotone and flat, and it's such a big contrast to how the characters interact with each other in the original trilogy, and having Jar Jar there to compensate really doesn't help. And yeah, obviously there are other things I don't like about this movie. For example, a lot of the CGI is very dated by today's standards. There are some massive plot holes. I don't like the stupid puppet Yoda, even though they have rectified it now. There are some continuity errors, mainly with Qui-Gon Jinn's existence, because in the original trilogy it said that Yoda trained Obi-Wan, and even though I can appreciate the filmmaking, I don't really like the pod race. I find it really boring, and the movie does bombard you with a lot of information that you wouldn't know if you haven't seen the original trilogy. But honestly, I think a lot of people let the hatred of those things overshadow what was actually really good about this film. Like the score, yeah, again, John Williams provides us with another amazing Star Wars score. The cinematography in this movie is beautiful. George Lucas shot this movie really well. The lightsaber choreography was a massive step above the original trilogy and was a blast to watch throughout the whole movie. Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn, one of the best performances in the whole trilogy, and even though we didn't get a lot of Darth Maul, what we did get was still pretty cool. And just how much this movie did for filmmaking. Like with the original trilogy, Phantom Menace continues the Star Wars tradition of pushing the boundaries of special effects. And even though it has given us some dated CGI, it's also given us some fantastic CGI. Just look at the underwater sequence if you don't believe me. And if the digital effects aren't for you, there's also some great practical effects here, and a lot more than they used in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. There's some great location shooting, miniatures, prosthetics, set design. This movie has it all in terms of special effects. And finally, what I think is the biggest thing that people overlook when judging this movie is just how much it expanded the Star Wars lore. Seriously, in this movie we're introduced to an entire new era of Star Wars. We finally get to see some real Jedi and how they operate. It set up a new conflict between the Republic and the Separatists. We got to see some now legendary Star Wars planets like Khorasan and Naboo, and it's shown us even more of the planets we already come to know and love, like Tatooine with the pod racing and the slavery. So yeah, there are definitely some positives and negatives when viewing this movie, but really it only boils down to one important question. Is The Phantom Menace entertaining? Hell yeah it is. I've watched this movie over a dozen times and I've enjoyed it every single time. And honestly, after watching the Disney Star Wars movies, it's only just made me realise how important and original this movie was. And because of that, I want to give The Phantom Menace the same score I gave Return of the Jedi, of a 7.5 out of 10. So there are my thoughts on Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and you probably can't tell just by watching this review, but I've been working on this video for about a month now, so if you guys can pay it off by giving me a like or a subscription, I'll be really thankful for it. And I do want to make an Attack of the Clones review, because I want to make a review of every Star Wars movie, but I'm really not sure when that will be released. So yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.